Ethan stepped onto the polished floor of the Grand Drakari greeting hall with careful steps. He tightened his uniform jacket and smoothed the crease in his trousers. As Earth's junior cultural translator, he faced his first high-level assignment. Join the trade delegation to the Drakari Empire and help iron out misunderstandings. He had spent months memorizing Drakari customs, learning polite phrases and formal gestures. He pictured success. He did not picture marriage. The hall rose to silence when Queen Lazara entered. She glided on a court of living crystal servants, their smooth surfaces catching soft light. Her tall frame wore a robe of woven starlight threads that seemed to shift in color. Her eyes, large and gentle, studied Ethan with quiet interest. He bowed low, keeping his head touching the marble for a heartbeat longer than Drakari custom required. He felt his heart beat loud in his ears. The chief ambassador of Earth began with formal words about peace and shared prosperity. Ethan watched. Queen Lazar's lips move as she spoke. Then he prepared to translate. He felt pressure behind the translator's headset. He pictured each Drakari word in his mind before speaking. He remembered the phrase for Earth's willingness to serve as a fair partner. We are willing to cooperate. It was simple, but Drakari words were tricky. One small change could mean honor or insult. Ethan spoke into the mic, choosing the wrong word for cooperate. Instead of cooperate, he said bond forever. In Drakari law, that phrase meant a pledge of lifelong union. It bound to souls in a sacred bond that only marriage could match. For a moment, no one moved. Ethan froze. His mouth felt dry. In his mind, he replayed the phrase, this time hearing it with the wrong meaning. He felt a cold drop of panic slip down his spine. The Queen's crystal servants paused. The assembled dignitaries leaned forward. Ambassadors from other worlds shifted in their seats. Then Queen Lazara smiled. She spoke 3 words in Drakari. I accept this. Her voice was low, rich like wind through pillars of stone. She whispered to Ethan, in voice translators, that his words carried great meaning. He tried to speak into his mic, to say he had made a mistake. His mind stalled. He tried to recall the phrase for mistake, but froze on the unfamiliar Drakari. Syllables. The hall erupted in polite applause. The Drakari court musicians began to play a soft melody of strings and wind. Drakari noblewomen leaned over guards and smiled. Even the rival world ambassadors nodded, impressed. Ethan stood, slack-jawed, as a royal guard approached him and offered his arm.
Your Highness,
the guard said, we escort you to the Queen's chamber for the formal pledge. Ethan's mouth opened and closed. He tried to form a protest, but only managed a soft "I." Yes. As they walked, he whispered, I did not mean. The guard placed a gloved finger to his lips. No need, she said. You have honored the Queen. Today is a day of joy. Ethan's vision blurred. He saw a servant pushing a delicate cart of silver goblets. The goblets held a glowing liquid, called Life Bond Wine. In Drakari ceremony, the wine sealed promises. The liquids mingled when 2 people sipped. Marking them as bonded, the guard led him down a corridor of living crystal that pulsed underfoot. The walls whispered with the voices of past kings. Ethan tried to keep calm, repeating in his mind that this was a mistake he would correct soon. I thought of his notes, of the phrase for correct, but every Drakari word tasted wrong. They reached a tall stained glass door that opened without touch. Beyond, Queen Lazara sat on a throne carved from the hull of a fallen moon. She rose as they entered. The Life Bond wine glowed soft blue on a low table between them. She smiled at him, and for a moment the world narrowed to her eyes. Human. Ethan, she said in low tones that his translator rendered as clear, you have shown courage by speaking so honestly. Even if you meant no bond, your words held truth and strength. You see me as a partner worthy of promise. Ethan swallowed, felt his pulse pound in his throat. He tried to bow but stumbled. He forced out, Your Majesty, I am honored, but my words, they were not meant as bond. I only wish to say I want to help. The Queen's expression did not darken. She stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was warm, almost comforting, Help is the first promise of bond, she said. I trust you. She lifted a goblet and offered it to him. Drink, and our pledge begins. Ethan's mind raced. He had studied Drakari law. If he drank, the bond would be sealed by law of his own choice. But if he didn't, he would insult her. He looked at the glowing wine, then into the queen's patient face. He saw hope there. He saw longing for someone who could understand her. With shaky hand, he lifted the goblet. He heard the crystal walls hum. He drank. The wine was sweet then, spicy, then smooth. Warmth spread through his chest. He placed the goblet down, wiping his lips. The queen smiled broadly. Crystal servants brought small plates of sweet fruit and glowing nuts. Ethan realized he had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Still, he felt a strange peace settle in his stomach. He knew, deep down, that he would do his best to honor her trust. He would learn every rule, every custom. He would prove that a human could stand beside a Drakari queen with honor as they ate. Queen Lazara spoke of her dreams for her empire. She told Ethan of meteor storms that threatened her world, of faraway star lanes she wished to open to peace. Ethan listened and translated her hope. He found himself speaking up, offering ideas from Earth universities, from human engineers who built bridges across oceans. He felt respect in her eyes. When the feast ended, the queen stood and extended her gloved hand. Ethan bowed low and took her hand. Tonight, she said softly, we celebrate the promise. Tomorrow, we learn to build together. Ethan nodded. His new life began at that moment when one wrong word became the bridge between two worlds. From silence and tension, a strange hope had grown. He felt it rise in his heart as they walked side by side into the living corridors of the moonship. Ethan woke in the soft glow of living crystal that lined the walls of his private suite. He touched the smooth bench carved from pale coral and felt the warmth of life-bond wine still in his veins. Memories of the feast pressed against his mind, the queen's shifting robe, the word he spoke by mistake, and the promise he could not undo. He stood and pressed a hand to his temple, steadying his breath. The door slid open without a sound, and a quiet servant entered with a low lantern. Ethan bowed his head, hoping his body spoke respect even when his words might fail. The servant set a tray on a low table. It held swirls of soft fruit slices and glowing seed pods that pulsed with light. Ethan studied their shapes before he spoke, tried a polite phrase but mispronounced the word for gratitude. The servant paused, then offered a gentle correction. Ethan flushed and whispered an apology. She bowed her head and said nothing more. He picked up a fruit slice and tasted its sweetness, remembering spring on earth. He closed his eyes at the flavor, then composed himself. He said, "Thank you for this gift," in Drakari that sounded close enough. The servant smiled and left. Quietly, Ethan felt small pride and a bigger fear. He must learn fast or offend again. Later, a royal aide arrived to escort Ethan to the Queen's War Council. He followed in silence, watching crystal corridors pulse beneath his boots. The council chamber was vast, with a map of star lanes and meteor streams glowing on a floating panel. Queen Lazara stood before it, her robe of shifting light threads. She spoke of a chain of meteor storms headed toward her world's orbit. She needed new ideas to protect her people. Ethan felt unease but spoke up. We could place reflectors in orbit to alter the meteor path. He explained how human ships once used orbital mirrors. The chief engineer furrowed his brow and asked for details. Ethan drew shapes and angles. On his translator pad, skepticism changed to interest. The queen's eyes shone with hope. She nodded. "Prepare your plan." The royal engineers led Ethan to a low lab filled with living coral and metal frameworks. They examined small satellites in glass crates. Queen Lazara stood beside him, listening to his simple questions. He asked about power sources and mirror alignment. The engineers showed him energy cells that glowed green. Ethan asked if they could adjust the energy flow to angle the reflectors quickly. They tried his idea on a test mirror. The crystal coral hummed as the light beam changed direction. The engineer's eyes widened with surprise. Queen Lazara smiled and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. as she praised his clear mind and brave suggestions. Ethan felt warmth spread through him. He realized that he could help protect this empire. Around him, coral walls pulsed with life, silent promise of new possibilities. Afterward, Ethan walked through the ship's corridors lined with coral that glowed like lanterns. He passed nobles and advisors who whispered behind closed crystal doors. He caught fragments of talk about a human playing power against Drakari tradition. Doubt pricked at him. He worried his presence might bring unrest. He paused at a window to watch stars drift past. He thought of Earth's quiet nights. A court clerk named Cerise found him and offered a map of the palace spheres. She pointed out meeting rooms and data archives. Ethan thanked her, then spotted a group of nobles gazing at him with curious eyes. He bowed and hurried away. He tucked the map in his pocket and resolved to learn every rule and name. He would earn respect one step at a time. In one corridor, Ethan met Laia, a young guard with amber skin and bright eyes. She carried a blaster rifle casually, as if it weighed nothing. She greeted him in broken human speech and asked if he needed guidance. Ethan smiled and accepted her offer. She led him to a quiet chamber where Drakari recruits trained. That Drakari guards valued honor and quick thinking. Ethan watched as trainees learned martial drills with energy staffs. Leah invited him to try a simple stance. He stood awkward and stumbled. The recruits laughed softly. Leah showed him the correct posture. Ethan felt embarrassment, then gratitude. He bowed his head and thanked her in Drakari. Leah laughed and said, "You learn fast, human." Ethan felt hope in her words. He realized that friendships could grow even here. That evening, Queen Lazara invited Ethan to the observatory dome. The ceiling opened to show a sky of shifting nebulae and distant stars. Soft light fell. Lazara stood by a railing and watched meteor trails in silence. Ethan joined her, feeling the hush of the room. He spoke of Earth's night sky, of constellations that guided sailors. Zara listened. Her eyes bright, she asked him to name a star. He chose one called Sirius and told its human legend. She smiled in wonder. She placed a gentle hand on his elbow. Ethan felt calm, trust warm his heart. She said, "Tomorrow we test your plan." He bowed and nodded. As they walked back through glowing corridors, Ethan carried new courage. He would learn every word and rule and stand by her side. He thought of his family on Earth and felt the weight of his promise more clearly. Ethan woke early to find the ship alive with whispers of his bond to Queen Lazara. Corridors that glowed with crystal light now seemed tense. Servants hurried to and fro, carrying food trays and messages. In the dining hall, nobles spoke in low voices at long tables. Some spoke praise of the human who stood by their queen. Others whispered that a human had no place beside a ruler. Ethan felt a knot in his chest. He realized that his promise carried weight far beyond his own fear. He needed allies. In a private meeting room, Ethan met Lié and the court clerk Cerise. They sat at a low table of polished coral. Cerise had a datapad filled with old records of Drakari bonds. She tapped the screen to show cases where force bonds ended in war or exile. Leah's amber eyes narrowed.
"Right.
"They will use this against us," she said. Ethan felt cold sweat. He asked if there was proof of a planned attack. Cerise hesitated. Then she said that several noble houses were angry. They might not respect the Queen's choice. The datapad glowed softly in the dim light. Later that day, Ethan and Laia followed Cerise down a crystal corridor to a hidden listening post. The walls hummed softly. They stood behind a polished panel where voices drifted through a small vent. Two nobles spoke in low tones. Ethan held his breath. One said they would end the humans' bond during the next great eclipse. The other agreed. To lead the strike, Ethan's heart pounded. He signaled Laia to record the words on his translator pad. Laia pressed a button, and the pad glowed. Proof existed. Ethan's hand shook as he copied each word. Leah's steady breath helped him stay calm. They slipped back to the corridor, hearts pounding. Cerise waited in the shadows. She studied the recorded lines. "This is enough," she whispered. Leah nodded. Ethan felt a rush of relief. He He carried the pad close to his chest. He knew it was dangerous to hold evidence. Cerise gave them each a small crystal key. It unlocked a private audience with Queen Lazara. They exchanged silent vows to protect the queen and the bond. Then they parted ways, returning to their duties as if nothing had happened. Ethan spent the afternoon learning court manners. He practiced Drakari speech with Leah. She corrected his tone and gestures. Some nobles watched and whispered. He felt their eyes. He tried to smile kindly. He felt the press of curious eyes, but also felt a sense of purpose grow inside him. Remembered Cerise's warning. Danger lurked behind polite faces. At dusk, the queen invited him to her study. He carried the crystal key trembling in his pocket. He found Queen Lazara reviewing star charts. Greeted him with a gentle smile. He bowed and presented the key. She opened it and gestured him inside. Inside the study, Ethan saw his own words recorded on a holosheet. Queen Lazara read them carefully. Her face was still. Ethan's heart beat fast. He said, "Your Majesty, I have proof of a plot against our bond." She studied his eyes. Then she nodded. "This is grave," she said softly. She collected the holosheet and let the walls glow brighter to signal the guard captain. Ethan's throat tightened. He had seen life take sudden turns. He knew that honesty was his strength. He let out a quiet breath. For a moment, the weight in his chest eased. Moments later, the guard captain arrived with a squad of warriors. Lazara stood firm, calm, and tall. The warriors presented themselves respectfully to their queen. Ethan stepped back, letting the Drakari take charge. The captain said, "The threat reads clear. We will secure the eclipse chamber." Lazara nodded. She looked to Ethan. "We will face this together," she said. Ethan felt both fear and honor. He bowed his head. The warriors filed out, their boots echoing. Ethan understood that he was no longer a guest. He was part of the imperial circle. That night, Ethan could not sleep. He lay on a coral bench and stared at the gently moving patterns on the ceiling. Memories of forced bonds on other worlds haunted him. He thought of the nobles who plotted against him, and of the queen who trusted him. He wondered if his place here was right. He whispered a promise to protect her bond with all his skill. Outside his window, stars drifted, felt a calm resolve. He would meet the eclipse ceremony ready. He would stand with her no matter what. The next morning, Ethan joined the queen at sunrise. She waited in the courtyard as crystal gates opened to the bright sky. Nobles arrived in their finest robes. Some greeted the queen with bows. Others only glanced at the human translator beside her. Ethan stood straight and nodded politely to each. He felt all eyes on him. He gripped the edge of his cloak and took a calming breath. He remembered the plan to reroute meteors. Now he needed a plan to protect his queen from traitors. The grand eclipse ceremony would begin at high noon. Ethan glanced at the sky as clouds shaded the living ship he would face. Nobles who saw him as an outsider, he would prove his bond meant loyalty. He thought of Queen Lazara's gentle promise. He thought of Laya and Cerise, who trusted him. With every step, his resolve grew. He would stand at her side and shield her honor. He was no longer just a translator. He was her partner, bound by word and vow. Whatever came next, he would meet it with courage. Ethan stood at the edge of the eclipse dais with Queen Lazara at his side. Out the ceremony hall was a vast dome of living crystal. Soft light glowed from the walls and floor. Nobles from across the Drakari Empire filled the steps leading to the royal dais. Some wore robes of shifting light. Others had armor of gleaming metal. All bowed their heads as the eclipse began. The sun dimmed behind the living ship's hull and cast a red shadow through the dome. Ethan felt a chill in his bones. He pressed his hand against his belt, where his cum bracelet and translation pad lay. He knew this moment was sacred. As the eclipse deepened, Drakari priests chanted words of ancient law. Their voices echoed against the crystal walls. Queen Lazara stepped forward and raised her hand. Ethan translated her greeting for the nobles. His voice was calm. He watched. The nobles lift their heads to hear his words. Some smiled in respect. Others watched him with cold eyes. Ethan felt the weight of his bond to the Queen. Every eye in the hall watched him, and the one wrong word that brought him here. Still he faced the crowd with steady resolve. But honor his pledge beneath the dais. Masked figures mixed with the priests. They wore ceremonial robes, but hid energy spears under their cloaks. Ethan had spotted one earlier, a flash of metal beneath the fabric. He whispered to Leia, who stood guard nearby. Leah's amber eyes narrowed. She watched the masked group move. Close to the Queen, Ethan's heart pounded. He knew that some nobles never accepted his place. They had planned to break the bond on this sacred day. He looked to the Queen, who knelt at the edge of the eclipse circle. The hall fell silent as the eclipse reached its peak. The crystal dome turned deep orange and red. A soft hum vibrated through the floor. At that moment, the masked nobles drew. Their spears, their cloaks fell away like dying flames. They aimed at the royal dais. A sudden beam of blue energy shot forward. It struck a crystal pillar and shattered it. Priestesses gasped. Ethan lunged forward. He grabbed Queen Lazara's arm and pulled her down behind a low ledge. She touched his hand in thanks. Fear and duty surged through him. Ethan felt a searing heat as an energy spear grazed his arm. The burn stung and his sleeve smoldered. Bit his lip to keep from crying out. He saw the attackers charging across the dais. He knew he had to act fast. His hand closed on the cum bracelet at his belt, held it tight, and the plan formed in his mind. Leah had shown him its circuits. Now he would use it as a pulse jammer. His fingers worked the locks and wires. Sparks flew as he rewired the device. Red light pulsed from its core as he slid the barrel of a spear inside. With a deep breath, Ethan pressed the activation switch. The jammer unleashed a wave of silent energy. The attackers' spears and belts stuttered and sparked. Their weapons went silent. They froze, mid-attack. Crystal pillars pulsed and glowed. Palace guards roared in triumph and charged forward. Captain Varric led the guard squad, raising his blade high. He cut down the nearest rebel. Others tried to restart their weapons but failed. The jammer held its pulse. Ethan fell back, limping on his burned arm, but he held the device high. Leah ran to his side and helped him up. Queen Lazara rose from her hiding place. Blade from Leia and led the charge. Her robe shimmered with soft light. She moved with grace and power. Nobles who once doubted Ethan now followed her command. The palace troops formed a line on the dais. They pushed the traitors back toward the hall entrance. Ethan directed the civilians to safe chambers. He raised his voice to calm them. Please. Move quickly through the side hall, he shouted. His words carried. As the guards cleared the dais, he felt relief wash over him. Outside, the living ship's hull glowed gently as the sky brightened. The red eclipse glow faded as the sun peeked from behind the hull. The hall brightened. Traitors lay bound in crystal cells. They glared at Ethan through glowing bars. Queen Lazara returned to the dais and stood beside her translator. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Her eyes met his. He saw gratitude and respect there. The nobles cheered, "Long live the Queen," and then "Long live the bond." The crowd's voice grew loud. Ethan felt tears sting his eyes. He bowed to the Queen in the court in the days that followed. The plotters faced trial before the Council of Elders. Queen Lazara spoke in their defense, telling how Ethan saved her life and the Empire's honor. The elders found the rebels guilty and banished their houses from the Empire. Peace returned. Ethan's burn healed, leaving a silver line on his arm. ... The Queen visited him in his study and presented him with a small crystal token. It glowed softly with life bond energy. "For your courage and quick mind," she said. Ethan accepted it with both hands. He felt new strength in his heart. He knew his place had changed. He was more than a translator now. He was a partner in the Drakari, Empire's future. After the trial, the Empire felt a new calm settle over crystal halls. Ethan moved through corridors with Queen Lazara's token in his pocket. He felt honor and worry. He knew that peace was fragile. Rumors spread of voices far beyond the Empire. Distant ships had appeared near Drakari space. The Coalition fleet arrived at the edge of Drakari orbit at dawn. Dozens of gray transports and sleek escort ships formed a silent line. Their banners showed a golden star between two wings. They called themselves the Tradition Guard. They claimed they came to protect Drakari law and remove any human usurper. Queen Lazara watched from a viewing gallery high above. Her robes of shifting light glowed softly. She stood beside Ethan. She frowned as the coalition message reached her palace. The Tradition Guard demanded that Ethan leave Drakari space within 2 rotations or face force. The hall fell silent at the stark warning. The royal council gathered swiftly. Nobles and elders filled the crystalline chamber. Some urged armed defense. Others warned war could shatter delicate peace. Queen Lazara raised her hand. She spoke in calm tones. Drakari law stands, she said. No bond made in honor may be broken by outside force. Her words echoed through the hall. Ethan stood beside her, heart thundering. He knew that Drakari law would protect him, yet he felt the weight of many worlds watching. He spoke in low voice. We can offer proof of Earth's welcome, he said, not ask for a peaceful council with our home world. He held the Queen's gaze. Queen Lazara nodded. She issued an urgent message to the Earth Exploration Corps. Ethan watched as a glowing channel opened in his cum bracelet. Distant voices spoke in soft tones. Soon he heard Earth's call sign, A71. This signal brought hope. He felt his pulse slow as he realized help might come. At midnight, a fleet of 10 ships slipped through the Drakari warp corridor. It looked like civil cargo cruisers. Their hulls bore faded paint and Earth flags. Drakari guards nearly missed them in the starlawn. Ethan's cum bracelet buzzed as the ships dropped out of warp near the palace orbit captain. Varric sent a salute as the human cruisers drifted into view. Queen Lazara and Ethan stood on a landing platform of living coral. They both watched as a small shuttle docked. A human officer wearing an old Earth uniform stepped out. She had short, dark hair and steady eyes. She carried a small device. Officer spoke into her helm mic. This is Commander Emily Farr of Earth Exploration Corps. We come in peace. Show us your council chambers. Queen Lazara bowed. She said, Welcome, Commander Farr. You honor us, Ethan translated. Felt pride. He watched Emily step forward under calm Drakari eyes. Moments later, Emily joined the council in the crystal chamber. The Tradition Guard envoy stood across the dais. He wore a silver mask and spoke with clipped tone. We demand the human translator leave, he said. Emily raised her hand and opened a holophile on her device. It showed treaties and greeting. Protocols between Earth and Doctor occur. The envoy's eyes flicked to Ethan, glared. Emily said Earth and Drakari share mutual defense and respect. Chapter 7, Article 3. No honored bond may be broken by external force. She turned to Queen Lazara. We stand by your law. Her voice was calm but firm. Nobles murmured among themselves. The Tradition Guard envoy's mask shimmered. Silence fell as the doors slid shut. A soft hum filled the room. Ethan felt relief. Queen Lazara and Emily exchanged a nod. Soon, the council declared that no force would break Drakari law. The threat had melted. In days after, the coalition fleet lowered its banners and drifted away. Drakari ships escorted them to the warp gate. Some captains saluted Queen Lazara and Commander Farr. Others watched Ethan warily. None dared to act. Against Drakari law and human solidarity, celebrations followed. Coral blooms opened in each courtyard. Singers filled the air with soft songs. Queen Lazara invited Ethan to join her on the balcony. Drakari citizens cheered and waved flags. Some held small Earth banners. The crowd roared in joy. Captain Varric came with a crystal cup of life-bond nectar. He handed it to Ethan. For your courage, he said. Ethan drank and felt warmth. Queen Lazara raised her cup and nodded. In that moment, 2 worlds toasted, a new alliance of trust. Later, Ethan met with Cerise and Laia in a quiet courtyard. They saw memory crystals in the walls. Laia said, You changed our future. Cerise nodded. Choice and honor matter. Ethan smiled and felt hope. He thought of Earth and knew he grew at home here. With peace restored, Queen Lazara invited Ethan to a private meeting. She gifted him a small crystal crown the size of a palm, glowed with faint light. "Wear this as a symbol of our bond," she said. Ethan accepted, feeling its warmth pulse. He bowed, voice soft. "I am honored, Your Majesty." As night fell, Ethan stood on a balcony of living coral. The stars above seemed brighter. Watched Drakari ships drift. He thought of Earth's quiet nights. He held the crystal crown in his hand. He felt stronger and proud. He had earned a place among these stars. Early next morning, the trade routes reopened. Ships from Earth and Drakari sailed side by side. Traders exchanged goods and stories. The legacy of one human mistake grew into a partnership that spanned galaxies. Ethan walked the docks, hopeful and proud. He would honor the bond always. Ethan woke before dawn to the soft glow of living coral in the palace corridors. He stepped onto the balcony where the first light of Drakari, morning painted the sky in pale gold and lavender. Below him, the city of crystal towers hummed with quiet activity. He held the small crown the queen had given him and felt the gentle pulse of life bond energy. The moment felt peaceful and full of promise. He thought of the storm he had once helped avert and of the bond that had grown stronger. With every sunrise that morning, the Imperial Council invited Ethan to take a new title, Earth Ambassador to the Drakari Empire. He stood in the high chamber as elders and nobles offered him robes woven from starlight threads. Queen Lazara placed the ambassador's sash across his shoulder. The elders spoke of his courage and honesty. Ethan bowed his head and accepted. He felt pride and responsibility in equal measure. As Earth Ambassador, he would speak for humans in Drakari halls, and for Drakari in human courts. His journey had begun with one wrong word, and now it would shape future generations. Soon. Ethan oversaw the first tests of the meteor reflector fleet. Engineers gathered in the palace lab, where coral and crystal frameworks rose like silent trees. Within weeks, small prototype reflectors launched into orbit. Ethan guided the teams with simple drawings and clear instructions. He spoke in Drakari in English, building trust between human and Drakari engineers. Each test beam bent a tiny meteor shard safely past the planet. With every success, the reflectors grew larger. By the fifth launch, they formed a ring around the planet, a silent shield born of human ingenuity and Drakar life in the palace courtyard. Drakar children gathered for lessons in human culture. Ethan and Laia stood before them with story scrolls. He told tales of sailors using stars to guide their ships. Leah translated and added Drakar legends of sky spirits. The children's eyes grew wide at stories shared across worlds. Practiced simple human dances under crabapple trees that grew in living crystal planters. Ethan watched as laughter filled the air. He knew that young minds would carry forward the alliance more naturally than any treaty ever could. To celebrate the new alliance, Queen Lazara declared a week of festivals. Markets opened under rainbow canopies of living light. Earth traders sold silk scarves and spice jars. Drakari artisans displayed crystal sculptures that glowed with inner life. Ethan stood beside the queen as merchants from both worlds exchanged goods and courteous bows. Dancers in ribboned robes twirled to music that blended human drums and Drakari string chords. Dusk found lantern boats drifting on reflective pools of coral water. Ethan raised a cup of lifebond nectar with guests, feeling the warmth of unity in every sip. Leah and Cerise joined Ethan at the festival's final night. They stood on a balcony high above the waterfront. Cerise laughed as she recalled the first time she helped Ethan avoid an insult in the royal library. Leah leaned on the railing and teased him about his initial blunders in court. Ethan smiled at his friends, grateful for their steady support. Together, they watched fireworks of living. Fire sweep through the sky crystal shards that bloomed like flowers. He felt that their bond, like the queen's and his, had grown through trust and shared trials. On the 8th day, the palace launched the full reflector array into orbit. A flotilla of Drakari satellites rose above the living ship's hull. Ethan stood at the control console with Queen Lazara and Commander Emily Farr. They counted down in 3 voices. 1, 2, 3. The array ignited in a wave of pale light. The reflectors formed a perfect ring, and a meteor wave passed harmlessly through. The observers cheered. From the council window, elders bowed to the sky. Ethan watched the ring hold firm. He felt hope radiate through him like sunlight through crystal. Earth Exploration Corps ships arrived days later to help maintain the reflector network. A new embassy hall stood on a coral terrace overlooking the star lanes. Ethan cut the ribbon with a crystal blade. Drakari and human diplomats filed in to applause. Inside, galleries displayed gifts from both worlds. Human paintings of mountains, and Drakari sculptures of living coral. Ethan's translator pad hummed as he welcomed each envoy. He imagined how this hall would host future leaders. Weaving human and Drakari voices into a single conversation, trade lanes reopened between Earth and the Drakari Empire. Cargo ships loaded with rare ores and Earth textiles sailed side by side. Ethan boarded one vessel to oversee the first convoy. He watched crystal containers fill with grain and spice pods. Captain Varric saluted him, smiling at the promise of shared prosperity. As the ship slipped through the warp corridor, Ethan looked at the distant stars, feeling that two worlds once divided had begun a journey together. The simple act of trade now carried the weight of friendship. That evening, Ethan returned to the palace balcony. The city lights twinkled like captive stars. He placed the crystal crown back on the railing. He thought of his family on Earth and the quiet nights under their pale moon. He thought of Queen Lazara's gentle trust and of the bond he had chosen freely. One wrong phrase had led to this new era. He whispered a promise to live with honor and to build bridges wherever he went. As the stars above and the coral below pulsed in unison, Ethan felt the future unfold in living light.